Thomas Vu grew up in an Adventist home, but as a young man, worldly influences drew him away from God. Although his family never stopped praying for him, he showed little interest in returning to the faith of his parents. Then one night, Thomas's life changed forever. My name is Pastor Sang, and this is ASAP Ministries Mission Matters.
When I was growing up, my parents taught my brothers and I about God. Every Sabbath, we worshiped together in a house church. But when I was a teenager, I moved to the city to attend school. I started spending time with classmates who had bad influence on me. Soon, instead of going to church on Sabbath, I was going out to party with my friends.
After graduating, Thomas returned home, but he continued to slide farther away from God, eventually joining a gang. His father was heartbroken and feared what would become of his son, but there was little he could do except pray. Then one day, an ASAP youth evangelist named Bao visited the highlands where Thomas's family lived.
As my youth group was going from home to home, visiting and encouraging church members, we met Mr. Vu, and he asked if we would talk to his son Thomas. So we went and visited him. We talked to him about God and gave him some sermon DVDs.
Bao and her friends invited me to come back to church, but I told them I wasn't ready. I enjoyed the life I was living, and I didn't want to give it up. But for some reason, I finally agreed to go to church.
I could tell that he was hesitant, so before we left, I asked him to make a pinky promise that he would come to church that Sabbath, and he agreed. But that Sabbath, he didn't come to church. When we went to visit him again, he smiled and told us, "I had some business to take care of, but next Sabbath, I will come." Again, I asked him to make a pinky promise.
In spite of his promise, Thomas did not come to church the following Sabbath either. But Bao and her youth group continued to visit, and they connected well with Thomas. Every time they invited him to church, he made a pinky promise that he would come, but then he would never show up. And every week that they visited him, he always came up with a different excuse.
On the Sabbath after their fourth visit, I didn't go to church. Instead, I went out with my friends that night and got drunk. On our way home from partying, we got into a fight with a rival gang. One of the men pulled out a machete and swung it at me. He cut off the finger that I had used to make a promise those 4 times to Sister Bob.
Thomas's friends rushed him to the hospital, where the doctors were able to reattach his finger. Bao and her friends visited and prayed for Thomas in the hospital, and he began to think about the way he had been living.
I realized I was running away from God and living an empty life. I wanted a change.
The next Sabbath, Thomas came to church. He began attending Bible studies and listening to the sermons that Bao had shared with him. And 1 year later, he was baptized. Today, Thomas works as an ASAP youth evangelist, sharing his testimony and supporting 2 house churches with more than 125 members, most of whom are young people.
Before all this happened, my life was aimless. I had no purpose. Now, I want to use the rest of my life to serve the Lord.
We often say that the youth are the future of the church, but here in this close country, the youth are the church. Here, well-trained young people give Bible studies and lead house churches. And like Bao and her friends, they are active in reaching out to new seekers and those who have fallen away from the faith. $70 will go far to support the work of an ASAP youth evangelist in this close country. Will you link up with these young soul winners whose passion is spreading the gospel and turning wandering hearts back to God? Because Jesus is coming soon. Now more than ever, mission matters.